All across America and around the world, this is Veterans Radio. This is Veterans Radio.
Good day. I'm Jim Fausone. I'm the officer of the deck today here on Veterans Radio, and thanks for joining us. We've got some interesting stories for you. We always want to remind you you can find more about Veterans Radio at its Facebook site or at the web, veteransradio.org, where we're on the web 24/7. You can find a lot of our podcasts there as well. We post new ones every Tuesday, so you can get a new story, a new interview, something you didn't know before by going to veteransradio.org. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors. First up, we want to thank National Veteran Business Development Council, nvbdc.org. It was established to certify both service-disabled and veteran-owned businesses. You'll find out how they can help your business by going to nvbdc.org. We want to thank Legal Help for Veterans. Legal Help for Veterans fights for veterans' disability rights all across the nation. You can reach them at 800-693-4800 or on the web at legalhelpforveterans.com. And finally, PuroClean. PuroClean is the paramedics of property damage. It provides water damage remediation, flood water removal, fire and smoke damage remediation, mold removal, biohazard cleanup. It also has a focus on veteran franchisees. You can learn more about them by going to puroclean.com. We just want to remind you that Veterans Radio podcasts are available on all your favorite streaming platforms, including rss.com, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Rees Across America Radio. So wherever you are, you can find us. We were recently identified as in the 15th spot, if you will, of the top 100 veteran-centric podcasts by FeedSpot. So we're really pretty proud of being in the top 15. So listen in wherever you're at to veteransradio.org and its podcasts.
We want to welcome to Veterans Radio today Joshua Shores, who goes by Joshua. So I'm not dissing him. I already asked him how he wanted to be called. Josh is a Marine. He served for
just under 4.5 years. Yeah,
4.5 years in the Marine Corps. Came out as a staff sergeant, and there's been a lot of growth in the subsequent years. And he captured both his 4 years in the Marine Corps, where he was both in Iraq and Afghanistan, and his time afterwards, the transition and the issues with that, in a book called Counting on Death, a Marine Infantryman's Journey from the Front Lines of Combat to the Fight for Peace. It's really well done, Josh. It really captured me in reading it. Nice job.
Thank you for reading it. I appreciate that.
And
thank you for having me on.
You know, you're a 19-year-old kid, and you say to yourself, I just need time in the Marine Corps.
Yeah. I was actually 17 when I signed the papers, and my dad was a Marine. My mom's side of the family had mostly Marines, and then I had my dad's side, grandpa and great grandpa both served in World War I and II. And so serving was just something that felt right, and I'd always had an interest in. But it wasn't anything that was ever required. Like my parents weren't telling me you need to go join the military. They supported if I wanted to do the college route, but I knew that's what I wanted to do.
And you grew up in the Midwest. Give us a little thumbnail of getting through high school and kind of what that upbringing was that you brought to the Marine Corps.
Sure. So my dad's an entrepreneur, and so I grew up with that mindset around me, and helping him at his shops and stuff growing up. So a lot of the time growing up, spending it with my dad was helping him build whatever business he was doing, just to be present and see how that worked. And in high school, I worked like 3 or 4 jobs at the same time, juggling. If it was summer, I was working more. Winter, I was working less. And I had a a very steady girlfriend that is now my wife. And
Now
so that we spent a lot of time together.
this is an important part of the story. He's been married now 20 years.
Yes, sir.
They went together for a number of years in front of that, but there was a wrinkle in this as well. And I think this is again a kind of a common theme among military men in particular. Talk about that wrinkle.
Yeah, so we stopped dating. So when I moved, I was a year ahead of her in school, and so when I moved out of town and went to the Marine Corps, that next year was her senior year in school, and we had dated at the beginning part of that, but um, you know, life back home being different from here, she was talking to guys, just hanging out and having fun, and I got jealous, and so I just started talking to women out in California, and so we decided to break up for, I think it was like a 3 month period in the
I,
fall.
I
And
think if I was talking to her, she wouldn't say we decided to break up.
oh no, it was me. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's right. Um, and yeah, and during that time it was just kind of like, well, I'm free and I'm about to go to war, so I'm just gonna do whatever I want. Um, and then right before I left on my pre-deployment leave, um, I apologized for all my shenanigans and asked her if she'd want to start dating again. And after taking a good slap at one point, uh, she took me back. So
As I say,
she's slapping me, to be clear.
this is a
She's slapping
story a
me.
lot.
Yes.
This is a story a lot of
Yeah.
guys can relate to. So I sorry to put you on the spot, but I
Yeah.
wanted to bring it out because
No,
here you
that's
are, a young Marine, and they say, you know what, you're a rifleman. We're sending you over. So talk about your first deployment. There are two of them we're going to talk about, but this first one I think is where, as a young guy, your values, your morals, your compass is really getting whipped around.
yeah. So going there. So when I first got dropped to 1-5, I got assigned to Alpha Company, which was the in a typical Marine Corps um, training workup. They have different assigned duties for every company, and ours was a boat company, which we didn't do any boat training when we first got there. They had done a little bit prior to us coming back before they went and did Fallujah, but it was all Iraq combat focused. And so when I got dropped there, it was with OIF-1 and OIF-2 vets who were very salty. And so there was a lot of expectations for myself and from them that we needed to be ready to go to combat for a third time, for the unit, with that being my first time. And so there's just a lot of expectations of us young guys to be able to perform and not let the team down. And so we looked to, we call them the senior lance corporals. We looked to, the seniors that had been there, the non-commissioned officers, everything. And, it was just a whirlwind of training. We got dropped right into like training evolutions for combat. So the mindset was definitely, we're going there to kill the enemy. And I talk about it a little bit in the book, but I think the failure as a military force to try to transition us into a battle space that was more like, hey, we want to win hearts and minds. There was a bit of a failure because our mindset was just go there and kill. And Marines, that's what we should do. That's what the Marine Corps is great at. And I think it was just kind of a weird time to be in there in 2005, right after all the big pushes from Fallujah and the initial Ramadi combat. So
You find yourself in some hot situations that again sort of tested your moral compass. You want to talk about that a little bit?
yeah, so combat is a interesting thing to take part in that you have your rules of engagement, and when you're new to it, you're like, well, that's easy to remember. I'll do those things, but then the situations present themselves, and then the enemy's tactics, because a good enemy would adapt to what our tactics are, and they start figuring out what our rules of engagement are, and so they adapt their combat to, um, maybe what we can't, how we can't respond, and it makes us feel very vulnerable. So it was a very confusing place to be, especially for, I think, a lot of the older veterans, because they had done, the initial invasion, which was an obvious way to do combat. You're just going across and fighting an enemy. And then Fallujah too, where they had dropped leaflets and made announcements that anyone left in the city is considered an enemy, to now putting us in Ramadi, where we're trying to mix in with the local populace. And so that mindset's a hard one to break, especially after you've experienced heavy combat. Um, and you know what happens when you let your guard down. So it was a very crazy place of like IEDs all the time getting blown up, or hearing other units getting blown up, knowing people that are getting killed and wounded. Um, and then also having, while you're going out on those missions and getting blown up, the goal of that maybe patrol was to, shake hands and kiss babies. And, how do you do that after you're losing people and fighting cowards, in a sense, because a lot of the tactics were quick ambushes, and then they run or they drop the weapon. So
One of the tasks your group had in Ramadi was protecting what was called the government center, um, where there would be U.S. troops there almost all the time, thus making it easy for the terrorists to go, well, those guys are going to be there. So we now know where to put our IEDs. And indeed, you lost some guys as a result of that. And again, that really threw, based on the notes that you took while you were there, that became part of the book, Counting on Death. The loss of those members in an IED situation at a government center where you were constantly trying to protect it really was formative to your experiences.
yeah, and that's why, I titled it Counting on Death, because I feel like the psychological effect of the IED um, on everyone else that survives them, because I was blown up 3 times in Ramadi with IEDs, and then we had like grenades I got blown up with separately in Helmand province. But having that many different experiences with it, um, it's easier. If I found it easier, and I think a lot of guys did, at just saying, well, I'm not going to come home from this, so I'm just going to do what I need to survive, and I don't really care, you know.
Pretty early on, you sort of said, I can feel myself turning into a monster.
Hmm.
That's a pretty shocking statement. Explain what you meant when you wrote those words in the book.
Sure. So the way I looked at the terrorists we were fighting as was monsters before I went. They killed, thousands of people in 9/11, and then the war up to that point, and um, the beheadings of their own people, or people of different religions in the countries that we were in. Um, I had this vision of what we were there to fight, and in reality, like, on reflecting and writing the book, when I first started this back in 2009 or 10, whenever it was I started writing this, it was like, well, we were doing some of the similar things, like not beheading people and all that, but it's like there was this weird line that we were trying to stay on, that I watched myself and watched others stray from, just on the psychological effects of war and the rules that were there. And it wasn't until I started doing, until I wrote the book and then some of these podcasts, where there was a realization that came out that um, some of the reasons I felt so much of the guilt that weighed on me was we were trying to do what we thought our government and our people, our citizens in America wanted us to do. And at one point, when I had that shooting that I got an inquiry or investigation on, um, of that man, it was like, why am I getting investigated for doing something that we were approved to do? And now, how does this war, like, now what do I do? I thought I was doing what everyone wanted me to do, what everyone trained me to do. And instead of nice job, it was, why'd you do that? And you might go to prison for it, And so it was as a 19-year-old kid, who's had pretty intense combat at that time and multiple blast exposure. It was like, I don't know what my brain was doing, but I was just in a survival mode.
Yeah, and I think what captured me about your writing here was it's just so candid and raw about the emotions you were going through and what you were trying to process and in your brain, but also on a day-to-day basis of what you run into and see and the reaction from militants and civilians and how the hell you tell the difference between them. Um, the book's candid enough to say, hey, at times I felt like I was a bully or a moron for what I was doing. And that's why this is not just a typical read. It's really a good reflection, I think, of the questions everybody has when put into those situations. Talk a little bit about the audience you were writing for.
I was writing for, I think, mainly friends and families of vets. A lot of the vets, the guys I served with, know the story, and everyone, I was talking with Kelly Thompson, the the retired lieutenant colonel that wrote the foreword for the book, and he's like, he was in some of those firefights, and he's like, yeah, did you remember this thing or this? And I was like, no, I don't. I don't remember that happening. And it's just interesting that any one of those men that has served alongside could write a book, and it would be, similar timeline, different events that they picked up on or witnessed. And so I was really writing it from my view, and to go back to you saying it was very raw. I came to the conclusion that I should just write it as real as I can, because a lot of the stuff that was weighing on me are the things that have led me to like suicide attempts and constantly thinking about killing myself. Um, and it's like, well, if I was willing to do that, why can't I just share a story and let's see what other people think? And I think a lot of guys have that weighing on them. And so if I have a book that family or friends can read, um, that gives a little bit of insight into some of the things that vets might be thinking or feeling, even though we are very good at hiding it, then that's a win in my book. And maybe
Yeah,
that gives a little understanding of it.
I think you've accomplished that. I think this is a
Thank you.
book that should be given to friends and family, spouses, and loved ones to get a little peek inside what maybe their Marine or Army vet went through in combat. You have a section on sunflowers. My note says sunflowers and blood, and I'm going to make you talk about it a little bit. But there's a
Sure.
line in it that says, in that particular section on page 62, that says, war turns the beautiful into the ghastly, the kind into the cruel. Damn, man, were you an English major?
Nope,
What
just a
what a
cranny
great
degree.
what a great turn of phrase, but really it's a bit of a trigger. Talk about it for you.
Yeah, so we lost 5 guys in an IED blast from second platoon, and our platoon was tasked with doing the quick response force for that. And so we were out there very shortly after it happened, and where I dismounted from on my vehicle, I had to walk through it was like a small, I don't know, quarter acres or smaller lot of sunflowers that were about knee high, a little maybe mid thigh high, and I walked through it, and I remember just looking down at them as I'm walking, trying to make sure there's not another IED or anything else that might be in there. And as I'm looking down, I start noticing there's debris and then blood splatter on the petals of these flowers, and knowing that the smells and everything else that were there of the 5 guys that had died, um, it just forever ruined the sunflowers for me. Um, I can't look at a sunflower and see anything beautiful. It's just like I see that.
And and
And
and
so
again, that's one of those lessons for our family members because unless you express that, nobody would know why that's a trigger, right? They would think, well, look at a bunch of your wife or you walk through a beautiful flower shop and a bunch of sunflowers. We have to express that, hey, this triggers this memory for me,
yep,
so that our friends and families know that and can work with that. I keep going back to family because during the middle of this, you sort of got to a point where you're accepting death and decide to end your relationship with your fiance.
Yep. Yeah, I called off the marriage and in the middle of it being planned because we were planning on getting married right when I returned from Iraq. And um yeah, I was numb to everything. This is after my friends had died and we were, middle, and it was July 17th or 12th or something like that. And I actually have it. I have a little black book that it would be, I've often thought it would be cool to publish or do it like some kind of a company document to the book because it's notes I took, but I stopped writing it at that point. I said, no, screw it. Why am I trying to even remember this? I will never forget it. Why am I writing notes? And at that point, I said, I'm not going to make it home. I'll call off the wedding. And so I went into the phone trailer and called my wife um, like an hour before we were leaving for the government center, which is a 4-day post that we'd stand. And I didn't have a chance to call, or she wouldn't have a chance to communicate with me during that time. So I kind of set myself up for failure by doing it right before we left. And then my friends, on post and at the government center convinced me that I was being an idiot and that I was going to make it back. And so the day I got back, I called and said, I'm sorry, and then of course it wasn't just an easy, oh, that's okay. Um, but I think that was her first instance of seeing that there were a lot of changes in me happening, um,
Well,
which were
you
concerning.
actually got to the point, and you write that at one point you felt you didn't deserve to come home.
Yeah. Yeah. Like seeing the quality of men that were surrounding me dying and the way I upheld them in my mind. And, it was like, well, why does this 3-time combat veteran have to go die? It should be me. Like, why this person survived way more combat than me. Um, I shouldn't be here. I'm not as good of a Marine as them.
And again, I think that's the sort of thing a lot of people think about. Why I like the book so much is it expresses this and makes us face it head on. Um, but you do come out of Iraq, you get home, you get married in 2019, I believe it is. Um,
2005. Get
oh,
married?
2005.
Yep, October of '05.
And now you're getting close to the tour being up. Do you re-enlist? What do you do? What do you do? Uh, have you proven everything you wanted to prove to yourself? Lot of stuff going on in your head, isn't there?
Yep. Yeah, and I had actually so my second deployment after I got back was to the 31st MEU where we did like a Southeast Asia float basically, and we went to Okinawa, China, and the Philippines. And so there's no combat in that one. And after I came off that, um, they said, "Hey, we're starting up this new organization, or this new one had just been started up called MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command, and they were looking for infantry, um, combat infantry volunteers at the time from 1-5, as they were already like pulling guys from recon, and they had stood down force recon to make MARSOC. So a lot of those guys just kind of went right to there. And so I talked with a couple of my friends and said, "Hey, do you want to extend our time to go do MARSOC?" And it sounded like a cool thing to attempt to do. And so I talked to my wife and said, "Hey, what are your thoughts if I, instead of getting out, which I was supposed to do, what if I extend my time and go to Marine Special Operations?" And she, we talked about it, and she understood that I felt like I needed to do that, and especially because I assumed that most likely we'd be going to combat, and I had combat experience that I felt would be wasteful just to get out of the Marine Corps with. And now having been I was a corporal at the time, a senior corporal, I just felt it was my duty to pass some of that on to younger guys. So, or people maybe that hadn't been to combat. And so we extended, and I went through the MARSOC, all that training, and ended up having to send my wife home during that because we just never saw each other. I was so busy training. And then that led us to going to Afghanistan. So
And how long was that tour?
that was December through April. And before that, we went to actually the Philippines for a month and lived there, and we were doing foreign internal defense training. So we cross-trained their Philippine drug enforcement agents and some of their special forces, and it was NBI, the National Bureau of Investigation for the Philippines. And so we did a month-long training program for them,
So
where I was the chief instructor there, and that was an awesome experience too. It was 76 students. So
the book talks a lot about coming home too, and again, it's candid. It's what you want to understand what's going on in a guy's head and help get a look at what other vets may be doing. And you write, I lost track of my soul, and when I accepted my death, I became the enemy. I turned into a terrorist in a foreign land and displayed little mercy toward my opponents. All that swirling around in your head as you get out, and you describe, you write, one word sums up my experience of leaving the active duty military and returning home: loneliness.
mm,
That's a lot to carry, and it's a lot to carry by yourself. How did you go through that phase?
I drank a lot and isolated myself.
So
So
I
I
told
made
you this book is candid, and Josh Shore's is nothing but candid. Again, a lot of guys do that. How do you keep going through that and not ending up, on the slab?
yeah, I think honestly there was something that happened along the way there. My brother-in-law died in a car accident, and right after I got out, like 3 months after I got out of the Marine Corps. And so my wife and I had a lot of optimism in what life was going to be while I'm still going through stuff. And so when my brother-in-law died, it was like, well, now that my wife, has been patient with me and supportive, is falling apart. It's like, it's like, you have to make a decision. And my decision is I want this family to work. And so, I just kind of put walls up, and then it was like, how can I be supportive of my wife? That's the most important thing at this point. And so it kind of had to put a lot of stuff aside. And at that point I said, well, I can't, I'm having trouble doing this. Um, I need help. And so I went to the VA and just said, I need help. And they started me in a program there. Um, and at the end of the day, the program, it was supposed to be just me in a meeting. And I said, because of the situation with my wife and I, and her brother passing away, I said, I can't do this alone. I can't do all this talking at these sessions and then come home and feel the way I do without my wife understanding what's going on. She doesn't have the patience for it. It's not fair to her. And so I asked if she could come in on the sessions, and they said, well, we can't do couples therapy. And I said, so you'd rather just me kill myself or do something else than have my wife sit in with me? Is that where we're at with this? It's ridiculous. And they said, well, we'll just have her sit in. And it ended up being something that was kind of a couples therapy, and it saved myself and my marriage. And it was a lot better for my wife to be sitting in and hearing me talk about the things that were weighing on me, versus me going to the session and then driving the 45 minutes back home and not wanting to talk about anything. So
You call out in the book, through our almost year-long weekly sessions, Dr. Laura gave both of us the tools to make it through relationship and personal issues. And I want to highlight, because a lot of guys think, well, I'm not going to the VA, they don't care, blah, blah, blah. But you call out that the mental health therapy, the sessions you got from the VA made the difference. It's work. You write somewhere, it's hard work. But don't cut off that avenue just because you think those people don't care. They care, don't they?
yeah, and they do. And that's the thing is, from what my experience has been with the VA system, at least, is they're not going to reach out to every vet and say, how are you doing? They're just not. It's impossible. And it's a governmental run program that supports veterans, but you as a veteran have to look at yourself and say, I need this help, or it's time now, or take the cues from your family. And that was another thing, that like there were cues from my family members of like, do you need help? Maybe you should stop drinking as much. And so like you have to be aware enough and willing enough to help yourself by reaching out and being persistent. You have to be your own advocate. If they're not doing a good enough job, you need to be the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. And yeah, I had to go do some of those things, and it was tough at first, but once I got the care, it wasn't shitty care. And I think that's what I hear from a lot of vets is like they don't care about. In my experience, after I started the program, and now even still, like I still see a therapist at least quarterly, if not more, when I'm struggling, and that's done through the community care from the VA. And I had to be an advocate to get there, and I had to say to myself that I need it. You have to be able to say that, and that's a big step, and it takes a lot because you don't want, it's not weak, but you don't want to come off as weak, and I think that's what a lot of
You,
us struggle with.
you also went on and got some more education. You picked up a business degree, which gave you some direction, and we'll do a full circle here, come back around. As you said at the outset, in high school, you worked with your dad. He was an entrepreneur, a number of different businesses, but you sort of needed that education and experience. And now you're back in that world of being an entrepreneur.
Yep.
Talk to us a little bit about, we've gone through the bad stuff. Let's talk about a little good stuff.
I think the people have asked me often, like, would you redo it all again? Would you want the same life? And I wouldn't be as open to life, I think, had I not been so close to death, and accepted it really, and seen what that really looks like, and so I really, the thing the Marine Corps had done for me is show me that you can get through anything, and there's no obstacle. It doesn't. Even if you don't have the right tools, you'll make the right tools, you'll find the right tools, and you'll make it happen. And so that mindset has carried me through my life as an entrepreneur, and some of the businesses I've started have not done very well. Some of them have been okay, but it's just like I have this drive in me to keep doing, and I think that is both from my father, but also the Marine Corps, instilling and showing me my own limits and showing me how I can overcome those. So it's directly translated, and yeah.
It is it's made you who you are today. And
Yep.
Josh Shores, we really appreciate the time that you spent with Veterans Radio today. The book is Counting on Death. It's on the Casemate imprint. Where can folks find this if they want a candid look at what it's all about when you're a Marine infantryman in combat?
Yeah, so you can buy it on Amazon, like you said, Casemate's site directly. They have it on Audible, and Barnes and Noble, anywhere books are sold. Books a Million. So.
Well, we wish you and your family. I can't believe she kept putting up with you.
Me either.
I lost count of how many times you tried to get rid of her, but she's too good for that. We appreciate your time and wish you nothing but the best.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Jim.
And I want to thank everybody for listening to Veterans Radio today. I am Jim Fausone. It's been a pleasure to be your host. I'm a veterans disability lawyer at Legal Help for Veterans, and you can reach us at 800-693-4800 or legalhelpforveterans.com on the web. You can follow Veterans Radio on Facebook and listen to its podcasts and internet radio shows
by visiting us at veteransradio.org. That's veteransradio.org. We again want to thank our national sponsors, the National Veterans Business Development Council, nvbdc.org, Legal Help for Veterans, a veterans disability law firm with a national practice before the VA, can help you on your claims and your appeals. It can be reached at legalhelpforveterans.com or 1-800-693-4800. And PuroClean, a leader in property emergency services. It's the paramedics of property damage, providing water damage remediation, flood water removal, fire and smoke damage remediation, mold and biohazard cleanups. You can reach them at puroclean.com or 800-775-7876. We also want to thank our local sponsors. This would include the Charles S. Kettles chapter of the Vietnam Veterans of America. That's chapter 310. VFW Graf O'Hara Post 423, the American Legion Irwin Preskin Post 46 in Ann Arbor as well, the VA Ann Arbor Healthcare System, and certainly the National Vietnam Veterans of America Association. You can be a sponsor by going to veteransradio.org, clicking on the About Us and our sponsors, and help us out. Keep this program alive for the 21 and 22 years. Keep us going for another 20. Thank you.